Welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. I'm Kevin Sully, joined by Lincoln Shrike. And on today's episode, we warned you last week that this was basically going to turn into a CJ Albertson podcast. And we are fulfilling that promise today because we have the man himself, the indoor marathon world record holder, the 50K world record holder, the treadmill world record holder, CJ Albertson. Thank you for coming on. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
It is our pleasure. I'm looking through your list of races. Obviously, you're very busy in November. I don't see anything crazy that you've done yet in December. I know you have a marathon coming up, but we're recording this on December 9th. Have you done anything crazy on a treadmill or outside in the past few days that we should know about?
No, not anything crazy. I think just more standard type runs, I guess. Yeah, I mean we're within 2 weeks of the marathon project now, so yeah, nothing too crazy right now. Trying to save everything for that race next Sunday.
Tell me about your expectations for that race. Usually, when we are evaluating someone's potential in the marathon, we look at, hey, they ran a half marathon and it went well a few weeks out or a couple months out, or hey, they did a 10K tune-up. With you, we throw out the entire book because not many people are doing treadmill marathons or 50Ks in the month before. What are your expectations for the marathon project in Arizona?
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. I think even for me, this buildup has been a little bit different and odd and yeah, I mean I've never really ran on treadmills at all before the past couple months. So that's something totally new that has been added in just because I got a treadmill. But yeah, and then obviously doing the 50K. I had done some 50Ks in practice before, but never an actual event. Um, and yeah, I mean, normally you'd have some sort of a smaller race leading up to it, but there really wasn't a whole lot that I could get into. I mean, there's that half marathon in Michigan, but that I was doing the 50K either that weekend or the week before. It was right around the same time. So yeah, it's a little bit unknown even for me. I mean, I feel fit obviously, and I've done a lot of good aerobic work. And the marathon, it's not one of those. It's not like the 1500 where you have to be like super race sharp. So hopefully the lack of racing won't be too much of a hindrance. But yeah, I mean I'm feeling fit and ready to go race.
Well, it seems to me you've done more than a lot of other people, so you may be ahead of the curve in that sense.
Yeah.
I have to wonder a very specific question. Do you, because you ran 209.58 on a marathon, do you call yourself a 209 marathoner now?
No, I mean I have no idea what that treadmill effort was worth, and I mean it doesn't really matter. So yeah, no, until I run under 210 on a certified course, in a certified race, then I won't be a sub 210 guy. Hopefully in
Was the
about
Oh, go ahead.
11 days I will be, but as of right now I'm definitely not.
Well, describe the differences in recovery, like what it took to recover post the very difficult course at the trials and then running a marathon on a treadmill. Was it just a wholly different experience for the legs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally wrecked after a marathon, anyways. Like after the trials, that was a hard course, but I had prepared for the hills, especially for the downhills, and I had done some uh, eccentric weightlifting type things to get my legs toughened up for it. So I wasn't particularly sore after the trials. I mean, I was sore, but I ran that next week, and I was coaching and I was running with my athletes and even doing some speed workouts. So I wasn't too beat up, but the treadmill is definitely easier to recover from. After that treadmill effort, I mean, the next day I felt relatively normal. I think it's a little bit less pounding. I think the treadmills are a little bit more forgiving, and it may depend on the type you have, but yeah, it's definitely easier. And I mean, it's complete, or I had it a little bit of a grade, but it's basically completely flat, and there's no downhill, so it really saves your legs. And so yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to recover from. Um, but I mean, I think I recover fairly well in normal courses, anyways.
Mhm. How dizzy were you when you stepped off the treadmill? Lincoln and I have been talking about that a lot.
I wasn't too I wasn't too dizzy. I guess I've gotten a little bit more used to running on the treadmill. Probably maybe 2 or 3 months ago now was the first time I really ran a longer distance on the treadmill, probably my entire life. I think I ran like 13 miles, and when I got off, I was like, what is happening? You feel like you're like um, and I think after just running on treadmills, because I had done a 50K on the treadmill before my actual 50K, and then I'd run 37 miles on the treadmill. So I think my brain kind of got used to the feeling of it. So you still feel a little awkward, but I think I've adjusted. But yeah, the first time I ran like 13 miles on one, I like you're like kind of you just feel weird, and it feels like you're walking on those things in the airport, the like moving gosh, I have no idea what those are called now that I think
Sidewalks,
about it.
moving sidewalks.
Yeah, the moving side. It feels like you're on that. Um, but now I've kind of gotten used to it, and it still feels a little awkward. But after a few minutes, it's not too bad anymore.
Well, 37 miles is more than a few minutes.
You
Well, no,
just
I mean,
casually
after a few
dropped
minutes,
37
yeah.
miles there, Steve.
you feel
Yeah,
real weird
yeah,
when you first get off, but then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, okay, I'm good. Whereas the first couple times, I was like feeling weird for a while.
Was this always the plan for you when you were running in college? Were you thinking, hey, when I'm done, I know that the 10,000 on the track or cross country isn't my bread and butter. Maybe even the marathon's not my bread and butter. Maybe I'm going to really excel at the longer stuff. Was this something that you came to naturally, or did you have it in the back of your head for a while now that you'd be good at the super long stuff?
No, it definitely wasn't planned. I didn't even do the 10K in college. I did the 5K and the steeple. I always wanted to run a 10K. It just never really worked out. I mean, you only have a few races to run, good 10Ks at, and I did the steeple. So that was, in those big invitationals, that's what I usually did, and it's really tough to do the 10K, 3K steeple double. Uh, Even though I kind of wanted to, it just never happened. But yeah, so it wasn't really planned. I mean, looking back, I excelled in long runs, so I guess it would have been easy to make that connection. I guess I just never did. And then when I graduated, I was pretty much done running competitively. There wasn't any. It wasn't even in the back of my mind really, like, oh, I'm gonna be a professional marathon runner or make the jump to the marathon. That didn't happen for a little bit over a year later, and it just kind of happened because I wanted to do one for fun, and then I ran well and just kind of kept going with it.
So there was no one moment when you thought, okay, this is for me, or was it when you crossed the line at that first marathon that you thought you could have a future here?
It was probably when I first started training for the marathon. So yeah, I hadn't really done much the year after I graduated, and then I decided I wanted to run a marathon, and I started doing like around 100-mile weeks, which I'd never really done before. And within about, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 weeks or so, I started doing some like pretty good long runs. Like I was running, I don't know, like between 5:10 to 5:20 pace for like 16 miles or so. And I remember like, oh, like that's pretty good. And then I remember I did one run at, I think it was at like 5:06 pace or somewhere around there for 16 miles. And this was like 8 weeks, maybe 7 or 8 weeks into marathon training. And I was like, I think this is pretty good. And then I was like, okay, I can definitely hit the Olympic trials standard if I can do that. And I was just running in a real low key marathon in Fresno, so I was I was kind of thinking, I was like, given what other people have done, I'm probably in around like 2:15 shape, but since I'm just running on this course by myself pretty much, I'm not going to run 2:15, but maybe I can qualify for the trials. And then I ended up running 2:17. Yeah, running by myself from start to finish. So, yeah, and then just kind of kept training with it because I really enjoyed the training, and then ever since then, I've just loved the event.
But why do you think you're good at it, basically? Like, why do you? Let me phrase it a different way. You were a solid, but obviously not a superstar at Arizona State, and now you've become one of the best marathoners in the country based on your times and what you did at the trials. Why have you gone from somebody who maybe wasn't at that level in the 5K and the steeple to all of a sudden now you're kind of one of the US's bright new stars in this distance?
I'm sure I have some physiological capabilities that make me, more prone to the marathon. Uh, when I look back in college, I always did really well off of just a lot of aerobic training. Like I was always the guy that would PR or come really close to PRing the first meet of the season. And it wasn't like I was doing super hard training and doing things that would make you peak early. I was just doing your normal, summer base training, some tempos and fartleks and long runs and stuff like that. But I'd run close to PRs just doing very little speed stuff, just strides and, whatever. And then we'd go up and we'd race in altitude at Flagstaff. And I always raced super well at Flagstaff, even though, it's at 7,000 feet. And my entire life, I've always lived at sea level or in Phoenix, which is like, 1,000 feet. But yeah, I'd go up there and run well, and I could run almost as fast at 7,000 feet as I could at sea level for some reason. So I guess my aerobic capabilities were there. Yeah, I'd run like the first meet, like the lumberjack invite or whatever it was called. It was like 4.5 miles, and I remember running like about 5-minute pace or just under. But then running 4:50 pace at sea level at the end of the season was hard. So it's like, why? It was like there's so little gap between what I could do at 7,000 feet versus at sea level 3 months later. So it didn't really make sense. But looking back, I guess it was just the aerobic challenges that you face at altitude I handled pretty well for some reason. So I'm guessing there's something that is the same that makes me good at the marathon because it's such an aerobic event. But yeah, in college I wasn't thinking of it as being the marathon. But then I think there's a mindset aspect to it. I've always enjoyed just attacking long runs, and in college I'd run my long runs hard. I'd try to average like 5:30 pace or under for my long runs my last couple years of college. So I'd be running like 18 to 20 mile long runs and trying to hold under 5:30 pace, which for someone running the times I was running, I was decent in college, but I was probably doing a lot higher quality long runs than people that were much better than me were doing. So yeah, I just, it's a combination of just how my body's made and just I enjoy the training of it, and attacking a long run isn't intimidating or scary to me. It's just fun, and I don't particularly like running for a long period of time slow. I kind of have to run it hard or it's just boring. Like, yeah.
And why have you embraced the more of the fringe side of distance running? I guess, most, other than like full-time ultra marathoners, I assume most people marathoners don't run 50K on the track or a marathon on a treadmill or a marathon indoors. What is it, a why not attitude for you, or why exactly are you doing these things that other marathoners aren't?
Yeah, I think it's definitely just one of those like why not type of things. The indoor marathon just kind of happened. I heard about it. My sister-in-law would actually be like, "Oh, CJ, this is something you would do." I'm like, "Yeah, this is something I'd do." And so I just contacted the race director and got signed up a few weeks before and just kind of did it. And it worked out. I won the race and set the record. And then the 50K, yeah, I'd done a 50. I think I'd done an actual 50K on the track and training before. I can't really give you a good answer as to why. I just did it. I just wake up and I'm like, I think I want to like go to the track today, and so I do. And then I just kind of keep running until I'm tired, and things like that happen. So I don't know. I think it keeps it interesting for me. Just especially because I'm training by myself, I think sometimes it can get boring, and just doing traditional training, it's just sometimes not that fun. And I like to do things that are challenging and that excite me. And the things that excite me are probably a lot different than the things that excite other people. But everyone's weird in their own way. So yeah, that I just kind of do what I like to do, and it happens to be these more kind of fringe type things that other people probably wouldn't find fun, but I do. So yeah, I mean, I'll probably do more interesting, odd things, but they're just things I enjoy to do, and I like just nothing really seems like it's scary. Like it all just seems like a fun challenge. So that's what I like to do.
Do you see that continuing? Imagine the world where you go and you run 208 and maybe you get, people want you to join a club where you train with people and you have a traditional coach. Are we going to see you become the 2 marathon a year, a couple half marathon a year, non-indoor marathon 50K treadmill person? Or do you always, is this part of who you are as a runner and it's non-negotiable? You're going to keep doing it?
I mean, I can't, obviously I can't say for sure. I mean, you never know how things are gonna go, but I think I can pretty confidently say I'm gonna continue to be like this for the foreseeable future. I don't think, to be honest, I just don't think I would be very good in a traditional training type setting, running 2 marathons a year and some halves or whatever. I mean, that's what I've done, kind of my whole life. I mean, is traditional settings. I mean, through high school and college, you're with the team, you're training, you're doing just normal stuff that everyone else in the country is doing. And I was decent. It's not like I wasn't good. I was just kind of an above average, mediocre type guy. And I liked it. It wasn't. I didn't. I enjoyed high school and college for sure, but I after like 9 years of that, I was kind of done with it. I mean, it just, so I think, and I think I'm a person that needs balance. Like when I'm just all in into running, and that's kind of all I have. It's just hard. I'm not good. I just, like in college when I just wanted to focus on running and I mean, I did school and stuff too, obviously, but it just, I'm super obsessive, and I know that about myself. And sometimes I can get too into it, and I'm just not as good. So I think having a job, I'm a coach and I teach at a community college, and I think that that allows me to have some balance in life, and allows me to focus on other things and stay engaged with the world and with people, and kind of get outside myself a little bit. And I think it really helps my running. I mean, once I started coaching, even without training, I became just a better runner. I mean, I ran, even when I was coaching in high school, just for a little bit, I ran 13:57 on the track, running like a little less than 40 miles a week and not really doing any traditional training. I just hopped in a race, and ran 13:57 and closed in like a 56 or 57, which I could never do in college. And I was like, what the heck? Where did this come from? This is like the second or third fastest I've ever ran in my life, almost PR'd. And I'm literally not doing anything. All I'm doing is like coaching. But it puts you in a different mindset that I think really helps me. And so, yeah, I don't want to lose that, and I know that it makes me better. And then also I'm married, so I can't really just drop everything and move to Colorado or whatever, just because then my wife has to leave her job and everything, and it just and I wouldn't want to leave her to go train for a year. I know some people do that. I need her. I mean, I wouldn't be at my best by myself or without her. I'm just not that type of person. So.
When I look at your list of races, you're getting to the Yuki Kawauchi side of things a bit with the frequency. Now you're not racing in a panda suit, so you have that box to check off later on. But we would always talk about Yuki and we would say, oh, imagine how much faster he would go if instead of doing 6 marathons, in these 3 months if he just did one. But what you're saying is that's an asset for you. That's not a hindrance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an asset. I mean, well, I'm not racing 6 times in like
Sure.
3 months or whatever. But and it depends on the races you do. Like he's doing because I'll look at some of his stuff and he'll be doing like small, low key marathons that are essentially just training runs. They're not, he's not lining up at a Boston caliber type race, 6 weeks in a row. So it's a little bit different. Like if you're running 217, 218, a bunch of weeks in a row, they're just training runs really. But if you're trying to run sub 210 6 times in 2 months, that's going to be a little bit different. So, which, even I like, yeah, it's just different. So, yeah, there's that. And I think that some people are just naturally a little bit better at recovering, or they're just able to handle the higher mileage. So being able to put in those long runs, or those marathons, which for him are really just long runs, it allows them to make the most of what they're good at. Because I don't think he's a guy that kind of like me, like he's probably not going to run 60 flat in the half. So he's got to approach the marathon a little bit differently.
There's a lot of anticipation building for this marathon project because there's really not in the US been this type of a scenario where there's a bunch of US athletes getting together with the goal of running fast. What do you know about the course? What do you know about the pacing and what, I mean, most people don't like to put time goals out there for the public, but I mean, what do you think you're capable of on a fast course, and given what the success that's been behind you recently?
Yeah, so the course is definitely going to be fast, or at least in theory. It's basically all in like 1 square mile, and we basically make these like U's. The course map is somewhere, you can find it online at the Marathon Project. But we make these U's, and so it's basically we're like looping around in a U shape. And so each loop will be 4 miles, and we have like 6 loops plus a little bit. And it's pretty much all flat. There's not really any hills. There's each loop will have, I guess, 2 90-degree turns and then 2 roundabouts. But the roundabouts are fairly gentle. They're not like super sharp hairpin turns. So I mean, depending on the way that it's measured, sometimes those turns can make you end up running a little bit longer than the actual courses, but that's going to be every course. So I don't know how much time that will add on, because you have like 2 times 6, so 12, like 24 turns or whatever. So I guess if you're like on the outside of the pack, you could end up running a little bit longer. But overall, I mean, I think it's going to be about as fast as a course as you can get, and it's flat, so you're not going to have any hills to slow you down. The weather should be pretty good. It looks like it'll be in the mid 40s, low wind, fairly low humidity. So they're having it set up to be paced. The top pace group will be at 209 flat. Hopefully for like 25 to 30K, they'll have some pacers. So yeah, I mean, every indication is that we're going there to run fast, and there shouldn't be any reasons why we shouldn't run fast, other than we just physically don't run fast. So yeah, I'm excited, and hopefully everyone will be coming in being pretty fit, and we can just kind of work together for the first half, and then beat each other down the second half.
Do you have the ultra marathon in the back of your mind as a potential thing? I mean, it's seems like something that could be possible for you, given what you're doing. You're doing like the weird stuff that ultra marathoners do. We just had somebody attempt and fail to break the 100-mile, the 24-hour world record on the track. do you see yourself getting really niche with the distance running?
I mean, yeah, ultra marathon is a pretty broad category. So there's a few things I want to do. The 24-hour record, that's I don't really have a lot of desire to do that anytime soon. But I think I would do some things that I think could complement the marathon. There's not a whole lot of ultras that I think would complement the marathon, but I think there's a few. So some that are in the back of my mind are Comrades in South Africa. That's a pretty big one, and it just seems really fun. I think it's pretty much made for me, actually. It's about 55 miles, which I think will end up maybe could be one of my best distances. And I really like downhills, so I want to do it on a downhill year. I don't think I'm particularly great on the uphills, so I don't really have a desire to do an up year. But when it's on the down year, that's I love downhills. I love ripping down, and I like it gives you just another aspect that you can train for. Because if you prepare well for the downhills, you can really use them to your advantage. And if people don't prepare, they're gonna. You'd think the downhills would help you, but the downhills really destroy you if you're not prepared for them. So I like that aspect of it. I think it makes it a lot more interesting. So yeah, I want to do that race at some point, possibly even this year. They're making 2021 a downhill year because they didn't have it last year. It's going to be the second week of June, I believe. And since I don't think there's really not going to be any major marathons until the fall. So I mean, it may be a good year to where I'm not really going to have to sacrifice anything from the marathon because there just simply won't be any races. And so if that race is going to happen, it could be a good year for me to do it. And I think because of the downhill, I do a lot of like speed work for it actually, and just kind of do a lot of ripping downhill. So I'd gain some coordination and some speed to where I think it could actually enhance the marathon versus if I'm training for like 100-mile race, I'm kind of just jogging around slow at like 6:45, 7-minute pace. And it's like, that's not help. That's, you're getting so far away from the marathon. You're probably getting worse. And I don't want to sacrifice anything in the marathon, but for Comrades, I'd like to go there and run under 5:50 pace, and really run quick on the downhills. So I'd still be within range to come back and run, 2:08 or whatever in the marathon in the fall. But so yeah, those are things in the back of my mind. The 100K world record maybe in a few years or after 2024. Yeah, I mean,
it sounds like the marathon is as low as you'll go. And it's kind of funny listening to you talk about it. It's as if a 10K runner is talking about doing a 1500 in the conference meet or something just to score some team points. Do you think that's going to help you on the starting line of these marathons, not just the marathon project, but then moving forward? Because most people, that's the longest distance that they're racing. The 99% of them, that's it. That's the pinnacle. Yeah, they've trained farther than 26 miles, but they haven't been doing 50-mile or 50K or 100K efforts. Do you think there's a mental part of the marathon that you're unlocking by making it not your farthest distance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely. I feel comfortable in the later stages of a marathon. Between usually for a lot of people, there's some uncertainty between like miles 18 to 26. And I mean, there still is for me. There's always going to be, it no matter how good a shape you're in or what you've done, it's still good. That last 10K is still going to be a little bit of a mystery in a way. But I think there's a lot less wiggle room for me, and I kind of know what I'm going to do. Whereas other people, it's like, who knows, you get to mile 23 and you're walking it in or.
Yeah.
So that definitely gives me confidence, and that kind of showed in the Olympic trials. I was in around like mile 20 or so. I think I was in like 18th to 20th place. And I really didn't do anything special over the last 6 miles. I just stayed consistent. And it just became like another long run, just like I had done pretty much every single week. And I was just able to just, kind of consistently run through that last 10K and run my way into seventh. And so I think like that just allows me to be consistent in the marathon. But there's still, there's still like the speed aspect of the marathon is that's more nervous, makes me more nervous, I guess, which sounds crazy because you don't typically think of like the speed being the limiting factor. But when I look at, this weekend, I'm watching Valencia, and first of all, people are running ridiculous in the half marathon, and you got to think that if people are running 57s in the half, I mean, they're going to be running and they're going to run the marathon at some point, and it's like, they just had that speed. And then watch, I don't know how many guys broke 206. I think it was like 11 or 12 or we're right around there. So it's like, okay, I gotta be able to run 4:48 pace to really be like remotely relevant at all, even in the back half of the elite pack. So, and right now that speed, it seems intimidating. I mean, to be honest, a little bit. So, but the distance, it doesn't worry me at all. But just the speed aspect, even running mile repeats at like 4:45 is like kind of uncomfortable. So, so yeah, I mean, there's some things I want to do to kind of build on the speed. But I mean, at some point, it's like sometimes you just don't. I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot more limitations that come with the speed versus, in the ultra events, I don't really see why there should be a lot of limiting factors for me personally.
What are your thoughts in terms of, you've been doing all these long races? People have been saying that the recovery process is better because of the shoe technology. Have you experienced that yourself?
I mean, well, it's hard because I've only been marathon running for 2 years, so it's like, well, yeah, my recovery has improved, but also it's like if you do anything for a while, you should get more used to it. I mean, the first time you run a marathon, or the first time you do anything that you've never done before, you're probably going to be hurting a lot after. And then after you do it a bunch of times, you're fine. I mean, the first time you guys ever ran like 10 miles, I'm sure you felt pretty tired the next day, but well, I don't know about now, but but when you're in your prime and you're running 10 miles,
A
it's
decade
like,
ago.
whatever. I ran
The
10
word
miles.
you're looking for, a decade ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think they definitely do help, or they do give you. There's definitely more cushion and more energy absorption, I guess. So it definitely, you can definitely feel a difference, like when I'm running like 30 miles in these shoes versus when I did it in just traditional flats. Uh, it's a lot. Your feet don't hurt, and it's a little bit easier to bounce back from. But I mean, even with traditional flats, I did a marathon, and then the next week, so I ran 2:16 in the marathon, which was a PR at the time, and then I ran the Sacktown 10 miler. I don't remember what I ran, but I was third, I think. And then I ran the indoor marathon the next week. So I did 3 races in 2 weeks. 2 of them were marathons. One was a 10-mile race. And that was all just with, traditional racing flats. And I was, 6 months into being a marathoner at the time. And I, I handled it all right. But yeah, but now it's like with the shoes, it's even it's even better. I can do even more things. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but they help
So
at least a little bit.
it doesn't sound like you're of the position that carbon technology is ruining road racing. Am I correct in that?
Well, I mean, even if it was like, even if it was definitively proven that you could run 20 more miles a week uh, with the same amount of fatigue factor on your legs, I wouldn't say that it's ruining it. I think the only reason that, you know, it is a negative thing is if you're one of the people trying to compare times from whatever, you know, comparing times between eras. And I know, like, I just broke the 50K world record, so it's like I can't really talk about times, but whatever. I'm not even claiming, like, the guy that, I'll be honest, like, the guy's record I broke, his performance, like, in all his performance was so much more impressive than mine by, I mean, it would not even in the same category. I mean, he ran in the Two Oceans, I think it's called. It's about a 35-mile race. There's some decent climbs, and he did it in, like, I think the early 80s or late 70s. So that was like his 50K split time in that race. And, you know, I did it on a track with good shoes and perfect pacing and no hills. So it's not even remotely the same, but whatever. The record was there and I had nothing else to do, so I took it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, my performance was better, or you know, I could have dusted him in that race. You know, it's like that's just it's, yeah, I mean, it's pretty reasonable to say that they're not even remotely comparable performances. But I just look at it as you're racing right now. So, like, right now, I'm racing against guys that have the same shoe technology. You know, we all have the same thing. If it allows us to train more, then that's great. Like, why is that a bad thing? Like, you know, if we don't want to train more, then, like, don't sleep. Like, don't eat any food. You know, don't go get a massage. Take away foam rollers. Like, everything we do is to enhance performance and allow us to train more and achieve higher things. Obviously, we have some limits within that. You know, I mean, there's drugs that, you know, we shouldn't take, and there should be limits with technology, but yeah, I mean, if you can train more, then I'm all for that, because it just it makes it more exciting to me, and it doesn't make it, yeah, it's just better. And I think it makes it the more that's available, I think makes it in ways more fair, in a sense. People like to talk about, like, the spirit of sport and whatever, and it's like people, like, seem to have this idea of just, like, they just want things to be, like, natural. But it's like, how is that fair? Because the less technology you have and the less training and recovery techniques and all the stuff that you have, then it's kind of just up to whoever was born with better genetics. And you can say, yeah, well, people work harder. I think that's kind of arrogant to say, like, oh, he just works so much harder, so he's better. It's like, pretty much most top athletes work equally as hard. I mean, maybe it's in a different way, but they all work hard. So if you just want it to be completely natural, we all run barefoot and we just go out and run, then it's like, well, whoever was born with the best genetics is going to win. Like, how is that fair? Like, how is that even fun? I think when you combine nutrition, technology, shoes, training methods, new technology, new things coming out, new research about what supplements to take, all this stuff, it just makes it, there's so much more into it, and you have to have knowledgeable people around you, and it just makes it more you know, attainable for people to find ways to get the most out of themselves, rather than in the 50s, it was like you just went out and ran, and if you happen to be genetically the best, you're probably going to win. And so, yeah, that's my perspective. The more factors involved, I think the better, because it makes it more interesting, and I'm into research, so the more things out there, I feel like I will benefit from, because I'm going to try to figure out how to use that, you know, to my advantage. Versus if we had no information, it's like, well, how good could I be? I mean, you just kind of, again, it's just genetics, and that's only so fun.
So it sounds like, you know, if we think back to the trials, people were documenting, well, who's in Nike shoes and who's not, because everyone's thinking was, oh, I mean, you're not going to agree to this because you're a Brooks athlete. You can't say that your shoe's inferior, but people were saying, oh, it's this many Nike people in the top 10. So for you were in a Brooks shoe, so you finished better than a lot of Nike people. So your performance was somehow even more extraordinary. Were you like counting all of the Nike people in front of you and saying like, wow, I finished pretty good relative to them, even though I didn't have the shoe?
No.
Okay.
I think, yeah, it's, I mean, well, and even if, even if a certain shoe is better, it's like, well, that's part of the sport. Like, people can complain about whatever, but that's life. I mean, what, like, that's just how life is. You have it's there's always multiple factors, and who you're around, the resources that you either have or choose to seek, to go after, or the people that you're with, or that are behind you or that support you, they affect your life. Like nothing's just like people. Sometimes in interviews, people say like I did this and whatever, and it's like, well, you're also just a product of like your whole environment. And like we kind of like the rags to riches story where people are like self-made, but I don't really. I mean, it's somewhat true to an extent, but like they had someone that helped make them great. And so I think the same is with shoes or whatever. It's like if someone has better shoes, then like find someone to work with that can make equally good as shoes, because that's how life is. Like, if and it's you can say it's unfair, like, some people are born without great parents, and so they're at a disadvantage, and that sucks. It does. But then it's like, well, when you become a parent, like you better be a good parent because it matters. And like that's how life is. Like you got to be a good friend because if you're not a good friend, you're putting your friend at a disadvantage if against other people that have good friends. And so I think it just having that mentality kind of puts it back on you to like, okay, I got to be a good person and help people, because if I don't, I'm putting them at a disadvantage. And so yeah, that's kind of a roundabout way to look at shoes. But yeah, if anyone makes something that's better than what I currently have, it's like, I mean, good for them. I need to get with the people I'm with, and we need to do better. So, yeah, I don't. It kind of frustrates me when people get upset about other things. It's like, do you live in the world? That's how everything is. But I
Yeah,
mean,
it's interesting.
I get where they're coming from, but it's like it's just how it is, and
Mhm.
and they did put I think the regulations were good, and there needed to be some sort of like rules with it, so that was good, and I think they did that in a fairly timely fashion, so I'm not complaining.
One more here before we let you go, CJ. We've talked about your three big performances: the indoor marathon, the 50K, and the treadmill. It's very rare that someone's done all three, so you can offer some expertise here. What from most fun to least fun? Can you rank them for me? Because I could see pros and cons for all of them. So indoor, obviously, you're on a 200-meter track. That's tough. The 50K, you're on a track the entire time, and you're running 50K. Treadmill, I think it goes without saying, you're on a treadmill for 26.2 miles. So most to least fun, those three.
I mean, to be honest, they're almost all exactly the same. I mean, you're running for like 2 hours and 20 minutes to 2 hours and 40 minutes at about the same intensity. So the for me, the environment that you're running in, it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
You're it's I mean, my perceived effort, no matter what environment I'm at, is roughly the same. I think the treadmills, well, the treadmill, if I'm doing them solo, the treadmill's easier because I have the treadmill to do the
Mhm.
pace work for me. But then when I'm in a race, I have other people to kind of pace with, so then it's also easy. So um,
It's simple.
they're
It's
really
really
they're
simple.
really the same. Yeah, they're it's really almost the exact same thing. I mean, when you look at a 50K or a marathon, a track or treadmill, you're running the same rhythm the entire time. I mean, the track is completely flat. I mean, the indoor track, there's some banks, I guess, but I mean, it's the same. So it's really almost the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I
on
know
the indoor marathon, no, it's fine. I wanted you to be honest. You were honest. Did you go halfway and then turn around and go the other direction in the indoor marathon so your left ankle didn't get swollen?
we started the opposite way of a track, and then at an hour we flipped and finished the normal way. But for my 50K,
Gotcha.
I just did it all in one direction, because I didn't really like the whole turning around thing.
It's weird
Waste
to go
too much
right.
time.
Yeah, it's weird to go
It
right.
it is weird. Yeah, you get used to it though. But it's weird at first. But then when you flip around, like when we flipped around in the indoor for like a good mile, it's kind of like the treadmill. When you get off the treadmill, you're like, what the heck? Like I can't even walk. That's how it was when you flipped. I was like, what? How do I turn? And then you go in and it's fine. But yeah, it was weird at first.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, CJ. We sure do appreciate it. We also appreciate you running all these races because it's given us stuff to talk about in the not so busy time of 2020 in track and field. Best of luck at the marathon project in a couple weeks.
All right. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.